Okay, now is the hour for a meeting of the Finance and Investment Committee of Vallecitos Water District, Tuesday, May 26th at 4 p.m. The notice to the public due to the evolving situation with the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and Executive Order N-35-20, so long as state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing measures, the Vallecitos Water District will hold future meetings via teleconferencing and allow members of the public to observe and address the meeting telephonically or otherwise electronically. During this period of time, Vallecitos Water District will not be making any physical locations available for members of the public to observe the meeting and offer public comment. The public is encouraged to watch and participate in the meeting from the safety of their homes. The meeting can be viewed on the agenda page located on the main page of the district's website. Public comments or questions can be submitted to the following email address: publiccomment@vwd.org. All written comments that are received 90 minutes before the meeting will be provided to the board, and a record of the receipt of comment will be noted during the meeting. We're called to order. Is there anyone teleconferencing with us?
Director Martin, I don't see anybody joining us electronically, and I'll ask Diane to let us know if she's received anything through the public comments email address. Diane?
I have received none.
All right, thank you.
Okay, items for discussion. Number one is the COVID-related financial tracking system.
Okay, so I'll jump in, and then Wes is going to take over and his team. So you'll recall that last week on Wednesday, as part of the budget presentation, we had a brief discussion and presentation about the COVID-related financial tracking system. And that was just a little bit of a preview. So what we wanted to do was set up an opportunity for the Finance Committee to provide us with feedback. The board didn't really have an opportunity to digest it or give feedback last Wednesday. So that's the intent today. So I think Wes is going to Wes and company will walk you through the metrics that we've established, give you an idea of what we think the reports will look like. And mostly we want to hear from the two Finance Committee members to see if there's a better way that we can present the information, or if there's other metrics you'd like us to take a look at and present to the board. And as a reminder, our thought is that on a monthly basis, once per month, we'll be making a presentation, giving a board an update on where we're at. The reason we're doing this is because when we were preparing the budget, we had to make certain assumptions about the impacts that COVID may have on our finances. So what we want to do is have a tracking report in place that sees how close our assumptions were. And if our assumptions were vastly different than what we're actually experiencing, we may need to have some course correction. And obviously things like that take time. We may start reporting in July, but when we report in July, we won't even have any fiscal year 21 data. So we'll start giving you tail end of fiscal year 20 data. But then as the year progresses, we'll get more and more data points, and we'll be able to better tell how things are tracking, how things are trending. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wes, and he can walk you through, again, it'll be a little bit of a recap of what you saw last Wednesday, but mostly we want to hear from the Finance Committee members. So with that, Wes, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, as General Manager Pro mentioned, this is going to be just a recap of what we did on the 20th. And basically, we're just looking for feedback to show you what we presented, a couple new ideas that we have, and then see what you'd like to see and if it meets your expectations. So looking at this, hopefully you can see that screen now.
Yes.
Okay. So we went through this last time, I think, and Mike's here with me, right? Is Mike Arthur here?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he was.
Or he was.
Yeah, he's still there. He's muted.
Okay. So in going through this, we showed you the agenda as far as the updates we'd be providing. And Mike's he would talk about water sales and purchases and give the historical and trends and talk about in dollars and acre feet. And in the future, we're going to be talking more about actual versus budget once we have an established budget and our expectations for the COVID impact, so we can show you those and how they're progressing. how we're tracking them, and you know, if anything happens that's unexpected, we'll talk to you about how you would like to handle it. And that'll be the actual versus budget circle you see here. But in these presentations, we expect to go through water sales, water purchases, delinquency charges, then lock charges and bad debt expense. And we're going to do it every month and hopefully give the same brief presentation in the same format every month. So we're kind of here tonight to decide on something that looks like a presentation you'd like to see. So that being said, this was actually Mike's slide, and I don't know, still muted, is he here?
No, I'm here.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to talk about the slide, Mike, and just get feedback, and we'll kind of move forward from there.
Sure. So this pie graph is one that's in the board packet every month on consent calendar. And what it does, it just shows the disposition of our customers, the makeup of our customers by sales component. So as you can see, residential customers make up about 70% of our customer base. So it's really important that when we start tracking things, we look at things in perspective. So if, for example, agricultural customers were to drop their use in half, well, they're only 5% of our customer base. So most of our focus is going to be on the big part of the pie of these customers. So if you want to go to the next graph, Wes. And I won't repeat the numbers too much, but just to show you, this is also a graph that we show in your board packet every month. And it's pretty much the bar representation of the pie graph. So it'll show you the composition between residential, irrigation, agricultural, and then commercial, industrial, and other. So those are the 4 sections of the pie graph. And that's how we kind of break up our customer base into those 4 sections. Again, you can see that residential is the biggest piece. With the COVID-19 stuff, we've had some methodology for projecting water sales in the coming fiscal year. And Wes mentioned that last week. It's the AWWA research done by Raftelis that gave us kind of some guidelines based on these certain categories. So for example, we're not going to say that usage is going to be cut 5% across the board. We know that's not the case. We know that commercial industrial is going to be hit a little bit harder than any of the other than the other 3. So we will keep track of them separately and report on them separately. And so the next slide, Wes. Again, not to go over the numbers too much, but here's the 4 categories that we'll talk about every month. So if you can just go ahead and hit to the end, Wes, we'll kind of bypass some of the numbers. So, one back. So we'll show you again comparison from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. We'll show you the total sales in acre feet and the total sales in dollar amounts, and we'll kind of compare them, putting into perspective that you don't want to look at just one item. So for example, if you look at sales only, you say 24 million to 23 million, that in of itself is not enough to make any analysis. So there's some numbers behind those. So we'll try to detail that out. And like I said, we'll look at the categories and see, like for example, 2020 versus 2019, we can see that residential is down 1.5%. We'll probably put in some kind of budgeted number that we projected to put in there, so we can see how actual percentage increase decrease is comparing to what we estimated for the budget. So as Wes mentioned, we're kind of looking for your feedback into what kind of makes sense for you to view, for us to analyze more in detail. And I think that's really the biggest thing about this. What I was going to also include is maybe a month-to-month comparison. But as General Manager Perlman mentioned, the first couple of months of the year for at least this type of data isn't really going to be meaningful. We need to get a few data points in. So for example, when we report in July 2020 sales versus July 2019 sales, there could have been a hotter month or some other type of thing that went on that wouldn't cause alarm if it's up or down more than 5%, 6%. So we want to have a few months of data in for the month to date and year to date information. So that's really all I have right now, and we can adjust this as the board sees fit, whatever is meaningful to you.
Yeah, so for this in particular, what I envision is as each month comes by, we'll show you what that month was, maybe compare it to the same month or year to date as the previous year, and the same, and we'll compare it to what we projected for 2021. And that's, to me, that's probably the most important. The whole point of this financial tracking is to see how well our assumptions are comparing to the actual. So just picture on a year or a month-by-month basis, you're going to get an update that says, hey, residential's up 4% over last year, but we thought it would be up 5% when we budgeted going forward. So that may say, hey, we're trending a little below where we thought we were, or vice versa. Maybe we thought commercial would be down 35%, but we start reopening the county faster, and maybe we're only down 15, 20%. So those would be positive indicators that things are recovering well. And that's what we want to do, track on a month-by-month basis to see how close our assumptions are. So so I think, Mike, this is all, Mike Arthur, this is all we're going to say about water sales.
Mm.
So I guess I'll look to the finance committee members, see if you have any thoughts about what may be helpful for you in terms of water sales volumes and dollars.
Director Martin, I think you've nailed it, actually, showing us 2019, 2020, and what the assumptions were are important to know, because that's what we're basing our budget on, is our assumptions.
Correct.
So that'll be important to follow that. So I think you've nailed it, personally.
Yeah, I have some ideas when we get to other parts of the presentation, but for the water sales piece, I think this is perfectly fine and captures everything that we need to see.
Okay.
And just remember that a 1 month report, like I said, in July, probably is not going to be meaningful yet until we get a few months under the belt.
Yeah, and from a water sales perspective, because of the lag of when people use it, when we go record it and we actually get the revenue, when we first report to you in July, you're actually going to be looking at like June or even May data of this month. So there's always a bit of a lag in our reporting.
Right.
So Wes,
Thank you.
did you want to go on to the next one, Wes?
Yeah, sure. So this is the one I showed you at the meeting on the 20th with the delinquency and lock charges. This is just a historical to give us a basis to kind of start on, because we don't have a lot of data points yet for either of these two revenues or anything meaningful, because we still have the pre-existing budget and COVID's only been around for a month and a half. So you can see, though, that the lock charges obviously dropped off because we stopped charging lock fees. But delinquency charges really haven't shown any or much of an impact yet. But this goes back all the way to 2004, so it's just to give you some historical data on delinquency and lock charges.
I have a question on that. Our lock charges, obviously, we're not going to lock it. It's going to go way down. On the other side of that coin, though, our costs are going to go way down as far as having to send personnel out there to lock. There's got to be an offset.
So yes, our costs will go down, but well, they actually won't, because we're still going to be paying the same salaries. They'll just be reallocated. So overall, the costs wouldn't be reduced. They'd just be used in different areas.
Yeah, if this was, Director Martin, if this was like a contract service, if we paid an outside party to do the locks for us and we didn't have to call them because we weren't locking people off, then you're right, the costs would go down. But as Director Owen said, or Manager Owen just said, our costs wouldn't go down. We would just be redeploying those people to do other things with customer service and meters.
And that being said, there would be other benefits to redeploying them elsewhere. Like, we can be proactive in replacing meters that need to be replaced. We can do stuff like that. There will be a benefit to it. There just won't be a direct reduced cost.
And just remind me, I mean, I know that the overall number on the grand scheme of things is very small, but in our budget that we just went over last week, what was your assumption? Are you guys just going to assume that we're going to have zero for the rest of the year, or did you guys assume that maybe at some point in Q4 that we'll be able to start doing this again, or what was your assumption in the budget?
So the assumption we built in for lock charges was zero for the fiscal year 2021. So no lock charges at all. So we took out the whole amount. It's like, I think it's $250,000 you can see here. So that was taken out. And then we have a 50% recovery built into the next fiscal year. So fiscal year 22 has half the year collecting like 125,000, but that's it.
Okay. But did we collect any before COVID, or was it?
Yeah. So I think I have, I don't know if I have the delinquency charges here, but yeah, I think we have around $80,000 so far this year that we've collected. So the line drops off, but you can see it's not at zero.
Mhm.
So here, see, it's around 80 to 85,000.
Yep.
So that's what we collected year to date.
Okay.
Yeah, so the committee members may remember that Vallecitos actually suspended locking off customers even before the governor mandated it. So we beat him to the punch, but at some point in time, the governor will probably relieve that restriction. He'll probably leave it up to the agencies to decide if they want to do it. I assume that will happen sometime during fiscal year 21. And when the governor does that, we will probably bring an item in front of the board to see, do you want to start instituting locks again, or do you want to be more generous or more lenient than the state would otherwise dictate? I don't know when that will be. I think it'll be, quite a few months away before the governor will allow agencies to start locking off customers. But we won't make a decision without the board's involvement.
Is there a report, or is there something that tells us who's taking advantage of this? Is it private parties? Is it ag? Is it industrial? Who's taking advantage of it? They know it can't be locked off.
We can, I assume, I'm looking at Alicia on the screen here. I'm sure we can go through the data and see which customers that triggered the normal lock criteria, what customer class did they fit into? I don't think we have that in the presentation today, though.
That would be interesting to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add that. I believe we can, on the report, we can get something put together.
So yeah, this is a historical trend slide. So this one probably will be excluded from future presentations, but for now it was, I thought it was useful information. And then this is very similar, but this is bad debt expense. So this is showing 2005 to 2020, our bad debt expense. And as I mentioned before in the last presentation, you can see in 2009, it peaked at 112,000. And again, we're not talking about huge dollars here, nothing compared to, water sales and purchases at 29 million. This is $112,000. So looking at this, the peak in 2009 was 112,000 that we had for an expense. And then it actually dropped off in 2014 and leveled off around 50 to 55,000. So we've actually built into the budget an assumption that this will be actually tenfold. So we built in 328,000 for water and 130,000 for sewer. So it's around $460,000. So you can see that's well above anything we've ever projected before. And we built in another year of actually that increase with a half year of recovery. So in the following year, it starts to come down half of that. So that's a really conservative assumption, but it's based on the methodology that was developed. So we've got that built into the budget, and we'll track the actual bad debt expense versus the approved budget once it's approved. And we'll compare that to the prior year data. And I'll show you that in just a minute. I've actually got a new slide that I've created to see what you think of it and get your feedback. So the next slide is what I was talking about.
Wait. Sorry, Wes. Sorry. Go back again.
Sure.
Thank you. Now, a huge decline between 2012 and 2013. And I'm going to assume that Alicia's department has done was doing a much better job at collecting. And you started going back up again in 19 because you couldn't shut it off. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so that jump we're seeing now in 20 is probably a result of what's happening now. Probably a little bit of a spike. It could just be that we had, less customers paying their bills on time in 2020 as well. We don't really know yet, but it is increasing.
But the dramatic decrease from 2012 to 2013, we obviously owe to Alicia's department. Is there one thing that made that happen besides better efforts to collect?
I think that's just recovery and people paying their bills.
Okay, for 5 years, those weren't bad years.
Well, 2009 was the recession, and then after that, it kind of hung around there. It looks like it lingered for 5 years. So I'm not really sure about 2011, 2012. It could have been, and keep in mind, bad debt expenses, it's only 112,000. For example, last year, we had one customer that had $25,000 that didn't pay it, and then we wrote it off, and I forgot the reason why. But so if you get a large commercial customer like that writes it off, it can put a big chunk in this graph. So it was a really tough time in 2009 through 12 for businesses, and that's why we have a larger amount there. But
Wes, what would be a reason we would write it off for? You usually can put a lien on the companies. There's things you can do. Why didn't we do that?
well, if they go out of business or they leave, Alicia can probably answer this better than me. But if a business is there and they have a large bill and they go out of business and we have no way of collecting it, we'd send it to collections possibly, and then if they can't get the money for us, then we have no choice but to write it off. That's my understanding. I don't know if Alicia, if you know more about that procedure or that process.
Yeah, so what happens is after 90 days in our system, it just gets written off as bad debt, and then it goes to a collection agency. And we have a contract with a company called Financial Credit Network, and they'll make the attempts to collect and send us a check for a portion, whatever's in our contract. And then we just pay it towards the bad debt. But probably some of the reason, I don't want to take full credit of it'd be nice, but getting those funds is we used to wait 4 months to send our accounts to collections. Past the 90 days, we'd wait another 30 days. And we started sending them at the 90-day period. So, and we've also, every 2 weeks, we're calling on those accounts that are closed. Once they get past the 60 days, we'll make 2 more attempts because we do send out their final bill. 21 days later, we'll send out a reminder that their final bill is unpaid. And then 21 days after that, they get their second reminder letter. And then we phone call and give them a last minute, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, you're getting going to collections. And after that, we send them to collections. So there's several attempts to get a payment on a closed account. Like Wes mentioned, if there's a business that has a large amount, it's really going to, jump these numbers here. But generally, maybe 10 customers every month will send to collection agency with an average of $100, $150 bad debt. So.
Yeah, but it sounds like that major drop off was a process change. That's a good thing, and we'll credit Alicia's department with that.
Yeah, part of it.
Well,
And then people paint it.
Excellent report. Thank you, Alicia.
Yep.
So any other questions on this? Should I move on?
Move away.
Okay, so the next slide, this is actually what I'm planning to report in the future, and I'd like to get your feedback on it. This shows it's March and April, and the middle line, the orange bar, shows the year-to-date number for bad debt expense. On the left, you've got the prior year-to-date. So as of March, the blue line on the left, and then as of April, the blue line, and then the gray line is actually, the gray bar is the budgeted amount year-to-date. So you can see here, both last year and this year, we were actually over budget, and it's increasing in March and April for bad debt expense. So it's sort of expected with COVID happening now that we have a higher bad debt expense, slightly higher, and we're slightly over budget. But as time goes on, I can expand this graph further and show more information if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, I like it.
What I'd like to see on that is the 4 categories you have, which is the gray block. Split that into the 4 categories so we know how much is ag bad debt, how much is commercial bad debt, and how much is residential bad debt. If that's possible to do.
So we'll have to look into that. This is mostly from just the financial statement, so I'll have to see if we can pull something from North Star, but we'll take some notes on it and see what we can put together.
It'll be interesting to see where the bad debt's coming from.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so this is kind of the same thing I'm planning on doing for late and lock. I just haven't put them all together yet. I started compiling these today. So I'm planning on presenting the same type of information for both delinquency charges and for lock charges. So you'll get to see the year-to-date and the prior year-to-date compared to our budget. And once we have an approved budget with the COVID impacts in it, hopefully it'll reflect how the current year is doing in comparison to what we expected and how it did to prior year. So I'll have 2 additional graphs that look a lot like this for delinquency. One will be for delinquency and one will be for late charges or lock charges. So those are the 3 things I plan on presenting. I don't know if you want to see if we can break down the lock and the delinquency by type of customer as well.
I think that'd be very beneficial.
Okay, let me see if we'll have to look into that, see if we can get it then. And then the next few slides are actually going to be a
Hang on a sec, Wes, real quick. For that type of analysis, I think it'd be easier on a day forward basis than to try to look backwards when we do comparison purposes. So just so you know, when we start doing comparisons to like a previous year, I don't know how hard it will be to break the blue bars into categories or types of customers, but I think it'll be easier when we enter into FY21 because we'll know to be breaking it down that way.
And we don't actually budget by category either. I mean, if we can get, yeah, it might be a difficult thing to put together, but we'll do our best.
I think, yeah, I don't want to speak for Director Martin, but for me, yeah, I don't need to see it compared to last year. But now that, just if we can just start tracking it going forward, as we get an account that gets written off, if we can just make a note on a spreadsheet that this was a residential account, a commercial account, or an agricultural account, just so we can at least have a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on out there and who's being impacted.
Yeah, I don't want to create a whole bunch of work for you guys, seriously. But maybe if you just look at this year's and track it going forward.
Yeah, so what we can probably do is, because we basically book this by the over 90 days and then we write it to bad debt expense. And I think there's an aging report from one of our systems that'll show by category. So if it says, irrigation 90 days, then I can put it in that as a bad debt expense for irrigation. So I could probably show at least a dollar amount by category, and I'll work on putting that together.
Thank you.
So the next few slides are going to be Alicia's, if she wants to just run through those and see if we can get some feedback.
Okay, so this one here was showing the number of accounts that are delinquent, and we did the 3-year also. Again, we may be able to separate this by category. I can look into it. I think maybe with the next couple slides that I have prepared, sounds like you want this separation of that, so we can look into that also for these, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. I got a kind of a question that's a little bit off the feedback topic, but looking at March and April, I mean, what was going on in 2018 that that we haven't even, even with COVID, we didn't come close to seeing the numbers that we saw in 2018 when there wasn't COVID and the economy was, roaring pretty good.
Yeah,
do we know? I mean, it's more just out of curiosity. It just seems like that's, there was 200 and plus, more delinquencies in April 18 than there was in April 2020 with COVID.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to figure out, how we're trending, we're trying to see who's really impacted right now. It's hard to tell because we do look like the same as 2018, and 2019 seemed to have been a good bounce back year for all around. But yeah, 2018 and 2020, we kind of look the same. It's hard to tell.
That's always the struggle when you're analyzing data. You can see how it is and how big it is, but the why is always difficult. And you can try to come up with reasons, but you're not always right. So, and as we start to analyze this as we go into FY21, I think we'll be struggling with that too. We'll start to draw conclusions maybe too early as to why, if it's low, we'll say, oh, it was overrated. It wasn't a big deal. But then we may see a delayed spike because some people may have some savings that they were relying on or some stimulus money that allowed them to pay, and then it just runs out. So they may have a delayed effect. It may not be until halfway through FY21, and it'll look like this weird thing that the county's reopening and things should be getting better, but we're starting to see increases in delinquent accounts. So we'll do the best that we can, but the why part is always very difficult in these type of analyses.
Yeah, it looks like, like around 1,300 accounts, 1,400 seems to be where we sit at every month. So I would, once it starts getting past, like 16, maybe we'll be able to start seeing that impact.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And you
Alicia,
call them delinquent at what time frame?
I'm sorry, what was that?
They're delinquent at what time frame? 30, 60, 90 days?
This delinquent is their regular monthly bill just past the 3-day grace. We usually put our late fees on about 7 days after the bill due date.
Oh, okay.
so
Okay.
Alicia, just to crunch the numbers, if we're looking in April of 2020, there's 1,471 people that are delinquent, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean that usage or that bill was in April. That was probably water that was consumed maybe back in February, right? By the time we read it, prepared a bill, sent it out, gave them a certain amount of time to pay, that date passed, and we consider them delinquent. So the usage, even in April, was probably pre-COVID.
Mhm.
So that's why it's a little bit difficult. And even when we say like an April billing, maybe some parts of April usage, but it's probably predominantly March usage. So our reporting, even just for consumption, is usually at least a month behind. And when you start looking at delinquencies, we're probably a couple of months behind. So I don't think these charts have caught up with COVID, but that should happen within the next couple of months.
Right. And also keep in mind that these are just the number of accounts that we applied a late penalty to. It doesn't mean that they didn't pay their bill the next day in full.
So that's good to know. And I can't remember, but is there another graph that's coming up for those who didn't pay versus those who might have paid late?
No, this graph here is just identifying customers who
went delinquent.
went
Which
delinquent.
is good, but I think we also want to capture, and maybe is that the same as bad debt?
Yeah, I think that would fall in that bad debt category.
Okay.
But again, they may not be considered bad debt for 90 days.
Right.
So by the time they fall on the bad debt thing, that was for usage that could have been like 6 months prior.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have a good snapshot until, September, October at the earliest.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then the bad debt are closed accounts. They're not current active accounts that are eligible to have their meter locked for non-payment.
Okay. What category do we have, or do we need to create a new category because of COVID of folks that, let's just say they go for the rest of the year without making a water bill payment, but yet we don't shut them off. I mean, what are they? Are they still bad debt, or are they're still going to be an active water user? They're just not paying their bill.
Right. They would fall under most likely the special care, the very last slide where we're tracking them. They're not getting the fees. We're not locking their meters, but we are aware of them. So maybe we can get into that when we get to that slide.
Yeah, but from a dollar perspective, though, we actually, if it's over 90 days, we will book it to bad debt expense, and if it's collected later, it comes back into revenue through delinquency fees. So that's why we increased the bad debt expense to the $330,000 for water and $130 for sewer, for that very reason. The people that won't be paying, but they will eventually.
Okay, so it's still, it would still be captured in the bad debt.
Yes, exactly. And hopefully recovered in about 1.5 to 2 years.
I don't know. I think once they go down that road, I don't know if they're going to be able to pay it back.
So that's why we built that sort of special care plan that Alicia was hitting on, so that we can revisit them later. We have notes on their account. We'll go back and talk to them and hopefully set them up with a payment plan. And, we'll be flexible in those payment plans, but that'll hopefully give us a way to collect the past due revenues instead of losing it altogether.
Okay, so this chart is revenue related to the previous chart. So the previous chart had the number of customers that were delinquent, and this is the revenue that relates to those delinquent accounts.
Okay.
So that's separate. I mean, it's the same, but we just separate it out just to have the revenue on it.
Yeah.
And then this one here, we separated out only customers that had the late fee waived due to COVID. So we had a total of 677 customers, dollar amount. This one, we were going to add the dollar amount to it. This is $677 of the, say, $20,000 that we charged. We waived $677. Specifically because the customers said they were affected by COVID in April.
Yeah, so those are the late fees. We're not waiving the principal amount that they owe. This is the fee waiver.
So just so I'm making sure that I followed, so the 1,400 and something delinquent counts resulted in $483 in late fees in April?
So if we go back to 2 more slides.
Yeah. Yeah, right here. So the 1471. Does
1471.
that April line up with the other April for the fees, or do they not line up exactly because they're different? They represent it different times.
So they should line up, but we're only waiving late fees if the customer calls in to request it, and then they get put into one of our categories. So these may have been the number of customers that were late. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we waive their late fees. So this is just a statistic on how many were late.
I don't think I knew that we were only waiving people who called.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't want to be just saying we're proactively waiving all late fees. We just told people, if you're having trouble making your payment, give us a call and we'll work with you.
What are how much is a typical residential late fee?
About $10, $12.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with the way you're doing it. I mentioned this the other day on a different topic, but at one point in time, the Boys and Girls Club waived the fee if you couldn't afford to pay for it. And that word got out, and people with their Mercedes were dropping off kids but couldn't pay the $40 fee. So yeah, I think we don't want to put that in between the pipes because that'll be unbelievable.
Right. And so part of the reason why we are tracking specific COVID, and we have special alerts that pop up on their accounts, is we want to make sure that if a customer is calling us and they're telling us, hey, I lost my job, can you waive my fee? We're going to go ahead and take their word for it. But if they call us next month, we're going to say, okay, it looks like we waived your fee last month because you said you were affected by COVID. Can you provide us with something that we can put on your account and we'll continue to hold? So we want to make sure that, like you said, people aren't just calling and saying, hey, can you waive it? And then we just waive it every month and not make the customer accountable for showing us any kind of proof. And we're just waiving fees, left and right.
Right. Great job. Great job. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this slide here is going to be all of our current accounts that are active, which means that they haven't moved, they haven't stopped their account, but they are past 60 days delinquent, and so they're overdue. We really didn't have much to track on here either because it's too soon. We have March and April, but we stopped locking meters, so we'll have to find a way also to keep track of the new customers. So we have about 250 customers in March that were subject to lock for non-payment, and we sent them out, lock notifications. And then in April, it increased to 414. That's when we also, in March, we stopped the lock process. So of course, a lot of customers know we're not going to lock the meter for non-payment. So now we're seeing customers, just our regulars, not even paying on time.
But then the lock was, so the overdue would have been sent a notice, a 48-hour notice saying that you're going to be locked in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
When customers get that notice, I think it's like 97% of the customers
Right.
come pay their bill right away so they don't get locked.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the slide shows the number of customers that would have been locked if we could have locked them. So there were only 20 customers between March and April that we lost the $150 revenue on, the lock charge.
Right.
Yeah, but just to be clear, that we did not lock anybody in
April.
right?
Right.
But these are people, this is the projected number based on our historical percentages of what would have been locked.
Correct.
So these accounts represent people who've gone back-to-back months without making a payment, basically. And so as that number continues to grow, it would, one suggestion I'd like to see, like, the accounts overdue at 90 days, number of accounts overdue at 90 days and maybe even 120. And I don't know how much work it would be, but I guess it's safe to pretty much assume that if the majority of anybody who would show up on the 90 days was previously on the 60 day, right? So, but yeah, that's some useful data to find out, is there a customer out there that's, 4 or 5 months into this and hasn't made a water payment in, half a year? I have no idea what we would do or how we would handle it right now, but I mean, it would be good to know how many accounts are out there that are, it's one thing that they have a bad month or two and they need a helping hand, but at some point, if we start seeing thousands of customers going for many, many months without making a payment for their water, it's going to have a detrimental impact on the rest of the customers.
Sure.
Yeah, we could do a chart like this with like 30, 60, 90, maybe 120 and do it by month so you can see if there's a trend as far as if that number is growing for each category.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I know that we can go down this, metrics rabbit hole, but it might be nice to know what classification of customers they are too.
Okay.
And we're kind of spitballing right now. And we're throwing a lot of stuff at you. At least I'm assuming you're the one that's going to be responsible for putting this all together. If at some point you get working on this and you're like, this has turned into a full-time job, then let Wes or Glenn know that this is, our intention is not to, put 40 hours of work on your plate with doing these metrics. So.
Sure. No, I'll have help with IT, and I'll work with IT to see what we can do. A lot of the data is mostly there. It's just a matter of extracting it and determining if it can be extracted and how many reports we have and where the data's at. So.
Okay.
And Director Sinella, on the flip side of that, we don't want to create so much data that we bury the board in minutia. And we're trying to give you something that's kind of meaningful and in alignment with the assumptions that we made in preparing the budget. I want to constantly remind everybody that we're trying to track and see how good our assumptions were over time to know if we need to make further adjustments one way or the other going forward. So I'm not against looking at other things, but if we start tracking things that we didn't even factor into our budget, I'm not sure how to relate the two. But I think, I know this is going to be an evolving, kind of a living report. It's going to change over time. We're going to start reporting data, and we'll find some things aren't as useful, and some other things will come up, and we'll make the changes that are necessary.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think really, at least for me, between now and the end of the year, I'm going to be really curious about digging a little deeper into the weeds. But I could see at some point where we'll just want to see more of the macro level with the water sales and bad debt and things that actually impact, money in and money out.
But then, the last slide, this is, we kind of revised this slide and hopefully we can make it meaningful. So this shows April and May, and what it shows is the number of customers that called to request fee waivers. So in April, for example, there were 172, and of those 172, 50 were just calling to say, I'm having a hard time, I need a break. One-time waiver will be good for me. And so we had 50 of those customers that just requested that one-time waiver, and then they started paying their bill on time. We had 53 that actually called and said, I'm having COVID hard times. I'm not gonna be able to pay my bill for a while. And we said, okay, we'll waive it, but then in the future, we'll need documentation from you. So they were noted, and we're waiting to see if they come back with documentation. The last category is the 69, and that's what we've been calling special care. And that's for customers that have actually provided that documentation, and we're no longer charging late fees to those customers. They're noted there so that we know once COVID is over, when someone pulls that lever and says no more COVID, we can actually contact them and say, we would like to collect the past dues. We'll work with you on setting up a payment plan. Let's start that conversation. So those are the categories we're kind of tracking, and you can see in May to date, it's actually gone up by 10 customers. So 5 of those customers called and said, I've got COVID-related issues, and we asked for documentation, we're waiting for it. And 5 more, which increased the special care to 74, said, we're actually put on special care, so they provided that documentation. So that's what we're tracking as far as the number of customers that contacted us and categories we put them into. I don't know if that's useful information for you. Hopefully it is, or if you'd like to see something else.
Yeah, I think it's all good. And I was just thinking too, this April-May timeframe is the timeframe when the majority of people got their stimulus checks too, which might be part of the reason why we didn't, they might have added a little extra money during this 2-month period to be able to pay their bills. And now, that $1,200 doesn't go very far. So I think we might start seeing more of an impact as the months go on.
Yeah, I think you're right. And hopefully there's the offsetting part where other people may get their jobs back and start to get more revenue come in. So hopefully those balance each other out. But I can almost guarantee these numbers are going to go up. The dollars lost, the number of people requesting hardships, it's going to go up for a period of time. And then hopefully as the year goes on, it'll decrease.
Mm-hmm. That's the end of our slideshow. As I mentioned, we want to kind of keep it brief because we're hoping to present it monthly. So if we can sort of summarize it into a limited number of slides and provide the most useful information, that's our goal.
All right. Well, I think I've added enough already, so I'm good.
Director Martin?
Yeah, great job, great presentation. If there's a way, I'm trying to, on a personal note, get some vacation time. So if there's a way to move the meeting up for next month, that'll be greatly appreciated.
For June?
Are you talking about a finance committee meeting or a
Yes.
board meeting? Okay.
Finance committee meeting. Finance committee, we could have it on no later than the 15th, if that's possible. Does that give you time to get your information together?
Okay, I didn't think we were planning on bringing this back in front of the finance committee meeting. I think what was going to happen is we were going to start bringing this on a trial basis to the full board. And that's where the report will be made. So you may recall, we have 2 meetings per month, 2 regular meetings for the board meetings. The first Wednesday and then the third Wednesday. In the second board packet, there's always our financial reports. So I think that's what we're going to try to do is instead of just having them on consent, we would have a regularly agendized action item or presentation item. And I think we talked about the second meeting of the month to provide the board with these tracking metrics. So it wouldn't be done at the finance committee meeting. It'd be at the board meeting. Doesn't mean we won't have other finance committee meetings and other topics, but unless the finance committee wanted to see this one last time, but otherwise I think we're trying to take advantage of this opportunity to fine tune this report and then take it forward.
So that would be the board meeting of the 17th of June.
Yeah, Wes, does that sound right? At the
Yes.
17th, we'd probably be making, and again, if we did it on the 17th, you wouldn't obviously see any FY21 data because we're still in FY20. And even when we get into the first month or so of FY21, the data will be kind of sparse at the beginning, but then as each month passes, we'll get more and more clarity on where we're heading.
Sure. Great. Okay, unless there's anything else, are we ready to adjourn?
One more quick question for Glenn. Glenn, are you capturing savings during this time? And a couple of examples are, like on fuel, on travel and conferences. Are you tracking that anywhere? I mean, I don't think we need a slide on that, but is that something you guys are keeping an eye on as far as, I don't remember going through the budget, what we budgeted for this year for, for next fiscal year for travel conferences, but I got to imagine it's going to be less than it was in prior years.
Yeah, we certainly did. As we went through the budget preparation, we made adjustments in certain areas, and travel is a good example that we cut staff travel almost to nothing. I think we kept a pretty healthy budget for the board travel, although we're not sure when conferences are really going to restart.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the budget in there in the event that they do and directors want to travel. But I'll talk with Wes about that, how to track those items that we accounted for in the budget through reduced expenditures to see how the expenses actually are occurring.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be, again, at a high level, it'd be kind of nice to know.
All right.
All right, if there's nothing else, thank you very much, all. We adjourn the meeting.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.